In other news about high-performance vehicles, Air Force One is one of the most recognizable planes on the planet and probably the most important.
Obviously, it carries the President of the United States wherever he or she, perhaps someday in the future, needs to go, and now it's time for an upgrade.
Now, for the first time in 30 years, the U.S. is buying a brand new one, Air Force One. Critics say it's too expensive, but officials say it's necessary. Mark Albert spoke to the unit in charge of buying the new Air Force One for CBS This Morning Saturday, but he joins us now with a bit of a preview. Mark, what is the criticism here about updating the plane?
So the critics say the plane is just fine. It only has a fraction of the flight hours of a commercial 747 of the same age, that there are cheaper versions, that they could go with a double engine, a two-engine 777, for example, instead of the four-engine 747. But the Air Force comes back and says, we need this size of a plane with this amount of power to fly the President of the United States.
So how expensive is a new one?
Well, you can't afford it. Let's just say that.
Mark Albert?
I'm guessing.
My secret bank account in Switzerland.
Sources tell me that you can't afford that type of plane. Well, so
you're going to kill my ex-girlfriend.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So the Air Force gave us some updated budget documents, and we are talking at least $3 billion to start. That's for the first 5 years. It's an 8-year project. So the next 3 years after that, they don't know yet. So we're at least talking about $3 billion. It easily could go up to $4 billion for this entire project. And we do have a preview. We were able to meet with the Air Force, and the colonel in charge of buying this plane gave us her first interview. And let's take a listen. What is it like to fly on a presidential aircraft?
Well, first of all, for a president, it's fabulous. When they left office, the four who've left office say the thing they miss the most is Air Force One.
But under their polished exterior, the two aircraft that commonly serve as Air Force One are aging, now a quarter-century old. Even though both Boeing 747-200s have only flown a fraction as much as a commercial 747 of the same age, the Air Force says it's time for a new generation of presidential wings.
We've got a pretty good-sized team working on it.
Colonel Amy McCain is in charge of ordering the new Air Force One and gave CBS This Morning Saturday her first television interview. Why does the president need a new Air Force One?
It's the only 747-200 left in the United States that is flying. So it costs us a lot more time and money to keep that airplane flying than it used to. So it's actually cheaper in the long run to replace it.
And we also asked the colonel, how do you make this affordable for the taxpayer? Can the taxpayers afford a new presidential plane? And she says they're going to make it affordable by trying to use some competition on some of the subsystems. They're buying the plane from Boeing. There's no competition for the aircraft, but they're hoping to make it as affordable as possible with all the other systems they have to put on it to make it Air Force One.
What's incredible is that planes, as you know, Mark, they fly for years. You can fly planes that are 30, 40 years old as long as they're well maintained. And your point early on is that this plane is obviously well maintained and it doesn't fly as much as a commercial jet.
Exactly. This is probably the most well-maintained plane in the world, and there are actually two 747s that commonly serve as Air Force One. But the Air Force says a lot of the parts aren't made anymore for this particular model of plane, that so much has changed since the late 80s when they bought the 747s and they began flying in the early 1990s, that they want to have the most modern aircraft and equipment as possible.
In the long run, it's like the high cost of upkeep on a classic car.
At some point, you have to decide whether to junk it and get something new, or to keep making repairs.
Except if the President of the United States comes in with a classic car and needs a part, you try to do it. You try to do it solid.
Maybe they haven't heard of 3D printers. Maybe they should look into that. I don't know, but we'll have more tomorrow for you.
Awesome. All right. Mark Albert, thank you so much. Tune in tomorrow for the full report on CBS This Morning Saturday. We're going to be right back. This is CBSN.